Hello, my name is Jennifer Matthews. I'm 58 years old, and I'm going to tell you the story of how my husband of 32 years discovered, through a dusty VHS tape, that the woman he thought he knew had been hiding the truth about her childhood for over 3 decades. It was November 2019, a cold Saturday morning in our home in Portland, Oregon. My husband David was cleaning out the attic, something I had been avoiding for years. I was downstairs making coffee when I heard his voice calling me. "Jen, come look at this." My heart stopped. I knew exactly what he had found. If this story resonates with you, please hit that like button. It helps me share these memories with others who might understand what it's like to carry secrets that feel too heavy to speak out loud. Let me take you back to where it all began. To 1973. To a small town in rural Kentucky that most people have never heard of. To a little girl who thought her life was completely normal. I was born in 1961, the youngest of 4 children. My father worked at the coal mine, and my mother cleaned houses for families on the other side of town, the side with paved driveways and mailboxes that weren't held together with duct tape. We lived in a house that my father liked to call cozy. It had 2 bedrooms for 6 people. The walls were thin enough that you could hear your own echo in the next room. In winter, we could see our breath inside. My mother would say, "It's just the mountain air coming to visit." I believed her. My 3 older brothers, Tommy, Michael, and James, slept in one room on 2 twin mattresses pushed together. I slept in my parents' room on a cot that my father had built from scrap wood and an old army sleeping bag. Every night, I'd curl up in that cot and feel like the luckiest girl in the world because I got to sleep near my mama. I didn't know that I slept there because there was nowhere else to put me. Our meals were simple. Breakfast was biscuits, usually just flour, water, and lard with whatever my mama could find. Sometimes a bit of jam from the church donation box. Sometimes just butter if we were lucky. Lunch was at school, and I remember thinking how fancy it was to eat off those plastic trays with the divided sections. Dinner was almost always the same, beans and cornbread. Sometimes with fatback if Daddy had had a good week. On Sundays, we had chicken, 1 chicken, for 6 people. My mother would take the back and the neck, the parts she said were her favorite. She'd suck on those bones for an hour, making them last, saying things like, "This is the best part, you know? All the flavor is in the bone." I believed that too. I wore my cousin Sarah's hand-me-downs. Sarah lived 2 towns over, and every few months a brown paper bag would arrive with clothes she'd outgrown. I remember being so excited when those bags came. My mother would spread the clothes on her bed, and I'd get to pick which ones I wanted. I didn't understand that I was picking because those were the only new clothes I'd get all year. My brothers wore jeans until the knees blew out, then my mother would sew patches over the holes. Big, colorful patches that she called fashion statements. She'd say, "All the kids in the city are wearing patched jeans now. You boys are ahead of the trend." My brothers would strut around like they were the coolest kids in school. On my 10th birthday, I got 1 gift. 1 gift per year. That was the rule. But I didn't think it was a rule. I thought that's just how birthdays worked. You got 1 special thing and you treasured it the whole year until the next birthday came. That year, I got a doll. Not a new doll, but my mother had cleaned up an old one, sewed it a new dress from fabric scraps, and styled its hair with yarn. I named her Rosie, and she was the most beautiful thing I'd ever owned. I slept with Rosie every single night for 3 years. Fast forward to 1984. I was 23 years old, working as a secretary at a law firm in Lexington. I had left my small town at 18, gotten a scholarship to community college, and worked my way up. I wore thrift store blazers that I'd learned to alter myself, and I'd saved enough money to rent a studio apartment. That's where I met David. He was a paralegal at the firm, 3 years older than me, from a suburb of Chicago. His father was an accountant, his mother a school teacher. He had grown up in a 3-bedroom house with a backyard, taking family vacations to Wisconsin every summer, getting new school clothes every August. When he asked me about my childhood, I kept it vague. Small town in Kentucky. I'd say, simple life, lots of love, All of that was true. I just left out the rest. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. In those 2 years, he never met my family. I told him they were very private people and that my hometown was difficult to get to. I made excuses every Thanksgiving, every Christmas. The truth was, I was terrified. Terrified that he'd see the house with the saggy porch. Terrified that he'd notice my mother still darning socks in 1986. Terrified that he'd realize the woman he wanted to marry came from a place where making do wasn't a choice, it was survival. We got married in a small courthouse ceremony. My parents came dressed in their Sunday best. My mother wore a dress she'd made herself from actual curtains, but she looked so proud and beautiful that I cried when I saw her. David never knew those were curtains. He just said my mother had a unique style. For 32 years, I kept my past carefully curated. We built a good life together. David became a lawyer. I went back to school and became a teacher. We had 2 daughters, Emma and Sophie. We bought a house with 4 bedrooms, a real backyard, and a heating system that worked. I gave my daughters everything I never had. New clothes each season. Birthday parties with themes and cakes from real bakeries, toys that came from stores, not homemade, from scraps. But I never told them stories about my childhood. When they'd asked, "What was it like when you were little, Mommy?" I'd keep it simple. "Oh, we played outside a lot. We used our imagination." I never told them that we played outside because there was nothing to do inside. That imagination wasn't a choice, was necessity. If you're watching this and you've ever hidden parts of yourself from the people you love, would you leave a comment below? I'd love to hear your story. Sometimes we need to know we're not alone in carrying these secrets. David's parents passed away in 2018 within months of each other. While cleaning out their house in Illinois, David found boxes and boxes of home videos. VHS tapes labeled with dates and occasions going back to the 1960s. He became obsessed with digitizing them. He bought a special machine, set up a whole station in our guest room, and spent months converting tape after tape. "It's important to preserve these memories," he'd say. "I wish your family had videos like this." I'd nod and change the subject. But then, in October 2019, he started asking about my family videos. "Your parents must have some old footage somewhere," he said. "Even just home movies, birthday parties. I could digitize those too." I told him my parents weren't video people, that cameras were expensive back then, that we just lived in the moment. He dropped it, but I could see the wheels turning in his head. Then came that Saturday in November. I heard him call my name from the attic. There was something in his voice, confusion mixed with discovery. I climbed the pull-down ladder, my hands already shaking. He was sitting on an old trunk, holding a VHS tape. The label, written in my mother's careful handwriting, said, "Jennifer's 8th birthday, 1969. "Jen," he said softly, "you told me your family didn't have videos." I tried to laugh it off. "Oh, I forgot about that. It's probably not even watchable anymore." But David was already heading downstairs with the tape. "Let's see," he said. "I can try to play it." I followed him, my mind racing through every possible excuse to stop this. The tape might be damaged. The player might not work. We should watch it later, not now. But 15 minutes later, we were sitting on the couch and David pressed play. The screen crackled to life. There was snow, then static, then suddenly color, grainy, washed-out color, but color nonetheless. The camera was shaky, clearly handheld by someone who didn't use cameras often. The lens focused and refocused, finally settling on a scene that made my stomach drop. It was our kitchen. That tiny kitchen with the linoleum floor that was cracked in 17 places. I had counted them as a child. The walls were a yellow that had once been white, stained by years of cooking grease and coal dust that no amount of scrubbing could remove. The camera panned across the room. There was our kitchen table, a fold-out card table with mismatched chairs. One chair was missing a back, so whoever sat there had to lean against the wall. My mother came into frame, carrying something on a plate. She was so young, only 36, but she looked older. Her hands were red and rough, her hair pulled back in a practical bun. She was wearing a dress I recognized, the same one she'd worn in about 30 different photos, because it was her good dress. She was smiling, that beautiful smile I inherited. She set the plate down on the table. It was a cake, a single-layer cake, made in a 9-inch pan, no frosting, just powdered sugar dusted on top. 8 candles. Then I came into frame. 8-year-old Jennifer, wearing a dress that was clearly too big. I was swimming in it. My mother had always said, room to grow, with such enthusiasm that I thought oversized clothes were fashionable. My hair was cut in a straight line across my forehead. My mother cut all our hair because haircuts cost money. I was beaming, absolutely radiant with joy over this simple cake. The camera caught my brothers crowding around, and I heard my father's voice behind the camera. Make a wish, Jenny girl. I closed my eyes, wished with all my might, and blew out the candles. Everyone cheered. Then my mother cut the cake. Small pieces. She cut that single-layer cake into 12 pieces, 12 tiny slivers, so that everyone could have some and there would be leftovers for later. I watched 8-year-old me accept my piece with reverence, like it was the greatest treasure in the world. David hadn't said a word. He was staring at the screen. The video continued. It showed us eating cake at that card table. It showed my father setting down a wrapped present wrapped in newspaper comics because we didn't have wrapping paper. It showed me tearing into it with pure excitement. Inside was Rosie, the doll I'd treasured for years. On the video, my mother said, "I fixed her up special for you, sweetheart. She was somebody else's once, but now she's all yours." I had never caught that phrase before, somebody else's once. The video showed the rest of the party. My brothers playing tag outside in November, with no coats, because we didn't own winter coats that fit, we just layered shirts. It showed the inside of our house, the living room with the couch that had stuffing coming out of the arms. The blankets hung over the doorways. I had always thought they were for privacy, but now I could see they were to keep the heat contained to whatever room we were occupying. The camera panned past my parents' bedroom, and you could see my cot in the corner. My tiny cot that I had loved so much. And then the video showed something I had completely forgotten. Dinner that night. My mother serving beans and cornbread for my birthday dinner. My father saying grace, thanking God for his provisions and for another year with our Jenny girl, and they're clear as day, visible to anyone who was watching. My mother taking the smallest portion, barely anything on her plate. And when my father looked at her, she smiled and said I could read her lips. I had a big lunch. The video ended. The screen went to static. The silence in our living room was deafening. I couldn't look at David. I kept my eyes on the blank screen, watching the static dance, feeling like that 8-year-old girl again, but this time the illusion was shattered. Finally, David spoke. His voice was barely a whisper. "Jen, that was..." He couldn't finish the sentence. I tried to stand up, to leave the room, but he gently caught my hand. "That was your childhood." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, and the weight of it hung in the air between us. "Yes," I said. My voice cracked. "That was my childhood." "The cake," he started, "was probably made with whatever flour and sugar my mother could spare that week." I finished. "She baked it herself because bakery cakes cost money we didn't have. The doll was from a donation box at the church. My mother cleaned it, sewed it a new dress, and gave it to me like it was brand new. Your dress in the video was my cousin, Sarah's. That's why it was so big. I wore hand-me-downs until I was 18 and bought my own clothes with my first paycheck." David was quiet, processing. Then he asked the question I'd been dreading for 32 years. "Why didn't you tell me?" I finally looked at him. This man I'd built a life with. This man who came from a world of stability and comfort. This man who had never had to choose between electricity and groceries. "Because I was ashamed," I said simply. The tears I'd been holding back for decades finally came. I was ashamed that I didn't know we were poor until I was 13 and went to a friend's house and saw that they had food in their refrigerator. Actual food, not just condiments and wilted lettuce. I was ashamed that I thought eating beans every night was normal, that I bragged about my homemade doll when other girls had real Barbies. I wiped my face, but the tears kept coming. I was ashamed that I didn't understand why my mother always said she wasn't hungry. That I actually believed her when she said she preferred the chicken neck. That I was so oblivious, so stupid, that I didn't realize she was starving herself so we could eat. David pulled me close. "You were a child," he said. "You weren't stupid. You were protected." Protected from what? The truth. I should have known. I should have seen it. "You saw what your parents wanted you to see," he said. "They gave you a childhood. They gave you joy and love and security, even when they had nothing. That's not something to be ashamed of." But I shook my head. "When I met you, and you told me about your childhood, the vacations, the new bikes at Christmas, the college fund your parents had been building since you were born, I realized how different we were. I was terrified that if you knew where I really came from, you'd see me differently. How would I see you? As less than. As someone who didn't belong in your world." David was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood up, rewound the tape, and played it again. This time, he watched differently. He watched my mother's face as she served that cake. He watched my father's hands calloused and scarred from the mind's as. He held the camera steady to capture his daughter's joy. He watched me, 8 years old, completely content with so little. When the video ended again, he turned to me. "Do you know what I saw?" he asked. I shook my head. I saw a mother who made a cake from scratch when she probably didn't have the ingredients. I saw a father who worked in a coal mine, one of the most dangerous jobs in America, to keep a roof over his family's heads. I saw brothers who wore patched jeans without complaint. And I saw a little girl who was so loved, so cherished, that she never felt poor for a single second. He took my hands. I didn't see poverty, Jen. I saw wealth. Just not the kind you can put in a bank account. If you're still watching, please subscribe to this channel. These stories matter. Your story matters. And sometimes we need to hear these experiences to understand that wealth isn't always measured in dollars. That night, David and I talked until 3 in the morning. I told him everything I'd never said. About how I didn't have my own bed until I was 19. About how I wore the same pair of shoes for 3 years, stuffing newspaper in the toes as my feet grew until they finally fell apart. About how I learned to alter clothes from watching my mother, because buying clothes that fit wasn't an option. About the time I was invited to a birthday party in 5th grade, and my mother gave me $1 to buy a gift, and I knew that dollar meant we wouldn't have milk that week. About the shame I felt when my teacher pulled me aside and quietly told me there was a program that could provide me with free lunch, and I realized that other people could see what I couldn't, that we were poor. About how I spent my teenage years obsessed with getting good grades, getting out. Getting away from that small town and that little house and the constant worry that someone would see the cracks in our carefully maintained facade. David listened to all of it. He didn't interrupt, didn't judge, didn't try to fix anything. He just listened. And when I was done, exhausted and raw, he said something I'll never forget. "I fell in love with you because you were kind and smart and funny and strong. Now I know why you're strong. You came from people who had nothing but gave everything. That's not something to hide, Jen. That's something to honor." The next day, Sunday, David asked if we could watch more videos. There were 5 more tapes in that box in the attic. Christmas mornings, school plays, random Tuesday afternoons that my father had decided to record. I didn't want to see more evidence of what I'd spent 30 years trying to forget. But David had already set up the video player. We watched them all, every single tape. And this time, I saw them differently. I saw my mother's creativity making Christmas ornaments from pine cones and ribbon scraps. Creating entire meals from almost nothing, turning poverty into adventure for her children. I saw my father's dedication working double shifts at the mine so we could have school supplies, building furniture from scrap wood so we each had a place to sit. Recording these videos on a camera he'd probably bought secondhand because he wanted us to have memories. I saw my brother's resilience, never complaining about patched jeans or shared bedrooms or the fact that vacation meant camping in the woods behind our house. And I saw myself happy. Genuinely, completely happy. That 8-year-old girl with the second-hand doll and the too big dress and the single-layer birthday cake wasn't suffering. She was loved. She was safe. She was rich in ways that had nothing to do with money. We called my parents that afternoon. My mother answered on the third ring, slightly breathless, like she'd been in the garden. "Hi, Mama," I said, and my voice immediately cracked. "Jenny, what's wrong, baby?" "Nothing's wrong. David found the old videos. From when I was little. There was a pause. I could hear my father in the background asking what was going on. "Oh," she said softly. "Those old things. I'm surprised they still play. Mama, why didn't you tell me?" "Tell you what, sweetheart? That we were poor. That you went without so we could have. That you didn't eat so we could." Another pause. Longer this time. Then my mother's voice, steady and clear. "Jennifer Marie, you listen to me. We were never poor. We didn't have money. That's true. But we had a home, and love, and each other. That's not poor. That's rich where it matters. But you sacrificed so much. That's not sacrifice, baby. That's being a mother. You do it for your girls without thinking twice, don't you?" She was right. I'd give Emma and Sophie anything. Everything. Without hesitation. "You gave us a childhood," I said. "You protected us from knowing. We gave you joy," she corrected. "That's what parents do. We carry the worry so our children can carry the wonder." I thought about that phrase. Carry the worry so our children can carry the wonder. That's exactly what they did. "I'm sorry I didn't say thank you," I whispered. "I'm sorry it took me 40 years to understand." "Oh, honey," my mother said, and I could hear her smiling through her tears. "You just thanked us every day by being happy. That was enough. That was always enough." After we hung up, David and I sat on the couch in silence. Then he said, "We should show the girls." Emma was 28. Sophie was 25. Both college-educated, both starting careers, both raised in comfort and opportunity. "Why?" I asked. "Because they should know where they came from. They should know what real wealth looks like." The following weekend, we gathered in our living room, David, me, Emma, Sophie, and the box of VHS tapes. I didn't explain beforehand. I just said, "We found some old videos of my childhood. I want you to see them." We played the birthday party video first. I watched my daughters' faces as they watched. Emma, always observant, noticed details immediately: the mismatched chairs, the newspaper wrapping, the tiny portions. Sophie, more emotional, started crying during the part where my mother served the cake. When it ended, Emma asked quietly, "Mom, were you?" She couldn't say the word. "Poor," I finished for her. "Yes, baby, we were poor. Very poor. But you never told us," Sophie said. "I know. I was ashamed. I thought if you knew, you'd think less of me. Think less of your grandparents." Emma shook her head firmly. "Are you kidding? Mom, that video is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Grandma made you a cake. From scratch. With nothing. And you were so happy." Sophie nodded. "The way Grandma looked at you when you blew out the candles, that's love. That's pure love." We watched the other videos. Christmas mornings with handmade gifts and a single orange in each stocking. School plays where my mother had sewn my costume from dish towels. Family dinners where my parents made one chicken stretch for 6 people across 2 meals. And through every video, one thing was constant: laughter, joy, love. "You know what I think?" Emma said when we'd finished. "I think we're the lucky ones." "How so?" I asked. "Because we got to grow up with everything, but we came from people who had nothing and still gave everything. That's a legacy. That's something to be proud of." That conversation changed something in me. For 32 years, I'd been running from my past, trying to bury it, pretending it didn't shape me. But it did shape me. Every single day. It shaped the way I never waste food. The way I know how to make a meal from whatever's in the pantry. The way I save everything, because you never know when you might need it. It shaped my work ethic. My parents worked so hard to give us so little, so I was going to work hard to make that sacrifice mean something. It shaped the way I love my children, fiercely, protectively, with the understanding that the greatest gift you can give them isn't things, but security and joy. It shaped the way I see people. I never judge someone by their clothes or their car or their house, because I know that poverty wears many disguises, and dignity isn't determined by your bank account. A few months after we found the videos, my mother had a stroke. She survived, but it left her weakened. My father, now 84 and still sharp as ever, became her primary caregiver. David and I drove down to Kentucky to visit. It had been years since I'd been back to that small town, to that little house. Remarkably, my parents still lived there. The same house. They'd fixed it up over the years, new floors, better insulation, a real heating system, but it was still that two-bedroom house where 6 people had once lived. When we pulled up, David stared at it for a long moment. "This is it," he asked gently. "This is it," I confirmed. We went inside. My mother was resting in the living room, still recovering. When she saw me, her face lit up with that same beautiful smile. I sat beside her, holding her hands, those same rough, work-worn hands that had sewn clothes and baked cakes, and held me when I was scared. "Mama," I said, "I watched all the videos, every single one." She squeezed my hand. And I finally understand. You didn't give us less. You gave us more. You gave us everything that mattered." She smiled. "Took you long enough to figure that out, smart girl." David knelt down beside her chair. "Mrs. Patterson, I want to thank you. Thank me." "For what, David?" "For raising the woman I love. For showing her what real strength looks like. For teaching her that wealth isn't what you have, it's what you give." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "You're a good man, David. I knew that the first time Jenny told me about you. I knew you'd see her for who she really is." "I did," he said. "I just didn't know the half of it. Before you go, I want to ask you something. If this story touched you, would you leave a comment telling me about a time someone sacrificed for you without you knowing? Or a time you realized that what you thought was normal was actually someone's extraordinary effort? These stories need to be told. These sacrifices need to be remembered. My mother passed away 2 years ago, in the spring of 2022. She died in that little house, surrounded by her family, at peace. At her funeral, I spoke about those videos, about the birthday cake and the handmade doll and the chicken necks she claimed were her favorite. I told everyone there what I wish I'd told her more when she was alive, that she was the richest woman I ever knew. Not because of what she had, but because of what she gave. David still has all those videos digitized now. We've made copies for my brothers, for my daughters, for anyone who wants to remember. And sometimes, on hard days, I watch that birthday party video. I watch 8-year-old me blow out those candles, making a wish. I know what I wished for, by the way. I remember it clearly, even after 50+ years. I wished that I could always be this happy. And you know what? In the ways that matter most, that wish came true. Not because life gave me everything I wanted, but because my parents taught me to find joy in whatever life gave me. Today, when my daughters call me, sometimes they ask, "Mom, tell me a story about when you were little." And now I do. I tell them about the card table and the patched jeans and the single-layer birthday cakes. I tell them about a mother who went hungry so her children could eat, and a father who worked in a coal mine to keep a roof over their heads. I tell them about 3 brothers who never complained and a little girl who didn't know she was supposed to feel poor. I tell them the truth, that I grew up with everything that mattered, and when they say, "But Mom, that sounds so hard," I smile. It was hard, I tell them, but it was also beautiful, because we had love. And in the end, that's the only thing that stays. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for letting me honor my parents and the sacrifice they made. Hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more stories like this. Real stories, true stories. Stories about people who had nothing and gave everything. Leave a comment below about your own experience with poverty, with sacrifice, with parents who carried the worry so you could carry the wonder. And if your parents are still alive, call them today. Tell them thank you. Tell them you finally understand. Because that old family video David found didn't show him poverty, it showed him wealth beyond measure. It showed him love.